We're going to take a look at two of the hugest platforms in the no-code space, Airtable and Monday.com. Now, it could be easy to take a look at these platforms from the outside and say, they look really similar. I mean, after all, they both feel kind of like a spreadsheet. They each have several different views to be able to visualize data. They've got forms to capture information from outside stakeholders. There's formulas to make calculations about your data. You can trigger automations to automate tasks in the background, and you can even have it integrate to outside business applications. So you might look at this and say, okay, well, does it really matter which platform I choose, or does it just come down to pricing? But we actually feel like the platforms are starting to diverge a little bit. And in this video, we really want to focus on the differences between them so that you can make an educated decision as you select the platform that's best for you. Hi, I'm Dan Lehman from AutomationHelpers.com, and we help businesses like yours get up and running on tools like Airtable and Monday and integrate it to your different business apps. We do have affiliate links in the description below, but we're not being compensated by either of these platforms to sway our opinion. Instead, our goal is to help you find the right tool that's best for you. Now, these videos can tend to be a little bit long, so we do have timestamps located down below if you want to jump between sections. Let's talk about pricing first, because the pricing levels are pretty different between the applications. And if you're budget conscious, you might need to go with one of these platforms over the other. So we'll start off with Monday.com. You can see we have 5 plans. One of them is a free tier and one of them is enterprise. We're not going to focus on enterprise because you have to go through the sales process for that, as opposed to just putting in your credit card and buying the plan. On the free plan, it's helpful to get started if you have a personal project going on, but there's a lot of limitations to this, and I don't think most businesses are going to be content using the free plan. So again, if you're just an individual and you're typically looking for something to manage a one-off project, could be a good fit for free, but honestly, most organizations are going to use one of the paid plans. Now, Monday does a lot of feature gating, which means that they include certain features on different plans for this. There's a little bit of consumption-based pricing here as well. So you'll notice that something like a formula column, if you want to be able to make calculations about your data, you're going to need that formula column. Well, that's not available until you actually get to the pro plan here. So a lot of the organizations that we work with, they have more complex needs. Most of them are using pro because of formula column. Time tracking is another thing here. If you want to be able to do more analytics and have chart views, this is all going to be a key part of running your business. You're probably looking at the pro plan. Another thing that'll make a huge difference here, if you're looking between the standard and pro plan, is the count of number of automations. So this is 250 actions a month. That's fewer than 10 per day versus automations. You get 25,000 actions per month on Pro. And for only a difference of $7 a month, that's usually enough of a reason to get most people to go from that standard straight into the Pro. Okay, so keep an eye on this. The most expensive non-enterprise plan, and we're talking about this on an annual basis, is $19 per seat per month. A seat is just users, so number of people that you have in your organization that are using the tool. So the most expensive one is $19 a seat a month. Now, if we come on over to Airtable, that $19 from Monday is cheaper than the cheapest of the Airtable plans. We've got $20 a user a month or a seat a month and $45. So for some of you who are budget conscious, right off the bat, you're thinking, yeah, I'm probably going to be using Monday. Now, Airtable's pricing mechanisms are a little bit different here. I'd say more of how they base their pricing is not around feature gating and saying, well, you can only have these features on this plan, but it's more around that consumption-based limits. So they talk a lot about the number of records in a base that you can have, the number of automation runs, how much storage you have. You can see that those are at the top of the pricing plans here. So that's how more people are making decisions about Airtable pricing, is not necessarily because of features. So if we're scrolling down and you're keeping an eye on team and business, you'll notice that it's a lot of the same check marks that we have here until you get down to these synced data and integrations. This is a little bit more of an advanced topic. This is saying, hey, we have different bases with different data and we want to sync that data into the base that we have, or we have outside data sources and we want to be able to sync that in. It's a little bit more of an advanced concept. It's immensely helpful for a number of businesses, but I think having that as something that's feature gated is very different than saying, oh, you can't have a Gantt chart on, both of the paid plans that we're looking at. Now, the last thing I want to call out about Monday's pricing, just so you don't get thrown off here, is that they have a seat minimum. So you have to purchase at least 3 seats on any of those paid plans. On the free one, you can have up to 2 people using it. That's just fine. But then any point after that, you have to pay for those 3 seats. So if you elect to go with a pro plan here, that $19 a seat a month, you're not paying for one user, you're paying for a minimum of 3. So that's at $57 a month. Now for larger organizations, no problem. You've got a number of different users anyways, so it doesn't make a difference to you. But if you're a small organization, if you're a solo entrepreneur, you might feel a little bit frustrated by this because it could be, hey, we're planning on growing. I'll probably buy seats in the future, but I want those additional features and you're still going to be paying for it even though you're only consuming one of those licenses. To be honest, both Monday and Airtable have signaled wanting to go more up market. So for them, this is just a natural decision. They don't really care about you're just a one-off user. They're really going after larger teams and businesses. The next feature to talk about, especially as it relates both to pricing but also performance, is around record limits. In Monday, we call them items. In Airtable, we call them records. These are individual lines, records in a database of information. So if you're talking about contacts that you have in a database, one contact, Dan Lehman, would be one record in a database. So if you have a CRM and you have 10,000 contacts, you'd be looking at 10,000 records or 10,000 items. Now, in the world of Airtable, this is more at a base level or database level. So within that database, you could have different tables within that. You could have a contacts table and an organizations table. And so this is kind of one joint limit around that of how many you can have in those bases. Now you can have multiple bases as well, but within a base, you're limited to a number of records. So on team, it's 50,000. On business, it's 125,000. And then we get this incredible step up on enterprise where we can have up to 500,000 records. But on Monday, this is interesting. They don't really mention this anywhere on their pricing page about those kind of limits. Now, they don't really have a construct of bases or databases, which has pros and cons as we're comparing it to Airtable. But when they talk about limits, it's all around performance. So if you look at their knowledge base or chat, they're going to tell you based on performance that you can only have 10,000 items per board that you have. So that's significantly lower. If you have a CRM and you're talking about, oh, maybe we go to a trade show and every time we go to that trade show, we're importing a list of 5,000 contacts. Well, that's going to hold up a lot better in Airtable than it is in Monday. However, to complicate this further, in a good way, Monday's been really focusing on MondayDB, which is their effort to improve performance throughout their application. And so at Elevate, they announced, hey, we're at this MondayDB 2.0, which says they support up to 100,000 items per board. And I think this is still rolling out here. What's a little bit confusing is that there's an asterisk here. It says tiers may require additional payment. So it's still a little unclear, well, who gets access to those increased limits? We love that we're seeing the move in that direction. I don't know what plans though. Is this only available to enterprise or is this available on all plans? And then what's really crazy, if you take a look at MondayDB 3.0 coming out in 2025, they're talking about 1 million items per board. Now at this point, that's a higher limit than the enterprise scale. But again, we're talking about in the future, so Airtable could be scaling theirs up as well. It's a little bit confusing if we're trying to compare apples to apples. So for the time being and in the past, if you needed a larger amount of records, Airtable was going to be a better fit. But it'll be interesting to see in the future with these MondayDB enhancements to see who comes out on top when it comes to record or item limits. I think it's helpful if we talk high level about architecture to help wrap your mind around how this is structured in each of the applications. So in Monday at the top level, we have workspaces. It's called the same thing in Airtable as well, workspace and workspace. This is mostly an organizational structure. So we could have one for product and one for engineering. We could have one for I'm doing demos out of. So you can create these to be able to contain all the other objects like boards and docs and everything you have within those workspaces. Now on the Monday plan, you're not really charged when it comes to workspaces, so it's helpful that you can organize this in the way that you want. When it comes to Airtable, you're actually paying per workspace unless you're on the more expensive of the pricing plans, in which case you can create multiple workspaces. The next layer down we have our folders, and they'd work as you'd expect them to. We can collapse and expand them. We're able to actually add multiple layers of this. So we could create within that folder, we could create another new folder within that. So we have a really nice way of managing our work and being able to structure and organize that. Within folders, now we can start to put our different objects that we have. And so we've got things like dashboards, and we have our boards, and we have docs. So we can actually put different kinds of objects inside of those folders, the most common of which, of course, are going to be boards. Now, if you're familiar with Airtable's terminology, the equivalent to board is a table. But a board is going to be a like collection of items. So in this case, we're looking at different videos that we're working on. You might have different projects or tasks or accounts. Those would all make sense to have as different boards. Now, within boards, this one's kind of unique, but we have what are called groups. And these groups can be collapsed. We can add items to these groups. Items can be moved between the groups, but these are actually part of the architecture. This is not a field that we have called status, and we're grouping by that status. It's actually part of the architecture. I'll show you the equivalent of what this looks like inside of Airtable. I have to admit, this is not my favorite architecture because it seems a little bit restrictive. What if you want to have multiple levels of group bys? Typically, you'd be doing that in other database applications. Seems a little bit more restrictive inside of Monday. Under our groups, we have items. These are the individual records themselves, and we can expand this and view information. We can add files and have an activity log associated with it. So these are kind of the core records that we're interacting with that are part of that board, are called items. And then the different attributes or the data points that we're tracking about each of those items are called our columns. And so in other applications, you might call them fields, but you can add these different columns of different types and collect the different information and display that information in different ways. Now, one thing I really like about Monday's architecture is it doesn't matter where that board is living. They could be in different folders. You have the ability to connect those boards to one another. So in other applications, you might call that linked records or linked relationships. In Monday, we have the ability to connect them, and we're not restricted by the grouping mechanism. Oh, well, because it's in this folder, you can't connect them. So I think that's one thing that's really flexible about Monday's architecture. Now in Airtable, we also have workspaces, but you're paying at that workspace level if you're on the less expensive plans. More expensive plans, you can have unlimited workspaces for grouping. So that's going to make an impact on whether you truly can use workspaces to be able to organize the work that you're working on. Within the workspace, we're able to look at this in different ways. These are the bases that I have. And again, remember, a base is like a database, and it's a workflow. It contains all of the data about a certain process. So we might have a base for a CRM and a base for a content management system. Once I open up a base, this is where all the magic happens. This is where I have my different tables. And the tables that we have inside of Airtable are very much like the boards that we have inside of Monday. So I have a table for tasks and for projects and for accounts across the top. And this is how we change between the information that we're looking at by those kinds of like records. The individual items in Airtable are called records, and we can add those in many different ways from forms or manually in here. We've got this really great construct called interfaces we'll talk about in a little bit. And then across the top, we have our different fields, which are very much like the columns that we have inside of Monday. The main thing that's different here is when we were talking about groups inside of Monday, groups are not actually part of the architecture or some metadata. They're part of the actual data of our records. So in this case, for tasks, I want to have tasks grouped by the project. So I can just say, hey, let's group by the project level. I could add another level of group where I say, let's go by the phase. And so we want to group first by the project and then by the phase. So you can see that we actually have multiple levels here that we can look at. So in my mind, this kind of construct for grouping is much more flexible in Airtable than it is in Monday. But I think Monday's got a huge advantage when it comes to organizing things by workspaces and by folders and being able to put the boards where you want in a way that makes sense without being constrained to the actual base that you're in. Next, let's talk about sub-items. Now, technically, this is actually part of the architecture conversation, but this is so specially unique that I think it deserved its own category. Monday's really good at managing sub-items. What do I mean by that? Well, items are those different records that we have within our board. And within an item, we can expand this a layer deeper. So if I have a task to write a script, and I'm working on my video production here, notice how there's this 3 here. I can expand this open, and you can see that I've got these sub-items that actually go into the script writing process. And here we've got our own columns. We could assign different owners. We could have our own statuses and dates associated with them. And we could even add our own custom columns that aren't even necessarily a part of the parent level item. that are unique to the sub-items. This is so powerful for project management because oftentimes you're thinking about things at different levels and you want to say, hey, I'm checking off all these sub-items. Now we've got the main task done that we're working on. In Airtable though, there's nothing there. You can expand a record, which is fine. And I made my own table, a custom table called subtasks. So I'll show you that in a second, but there's nothing that you can really do. And there's some workarounds. You can use some rich text fields and have your own little checkbox that doesn't really do anything with it. But this has been something that Airtable users struggle with because there's not a great implementation of it. Now, I have mentioned a workaround in some project management videos I've done for Airtable and when we're implementing for Airtable clients. So we could say, hey, let's look at this list view, and within a project level, we can have tasks, and then we can have our own subtasks level, and we can manage that. So it kind of works, but it's not quite as easy as it is inside of Monday. Now, both systems allow you to have a variety of different views to visualize your data. So if we're looking at this table data here, or a grid view inside of Airtable, that's what gives that look and feel of a spreadsheet. But you don't have to operate that way. So a lot of folks like to use a Kanban and be able to manage their work and drag and drop their different statuses. Lots of different ways to go about doing your work. And both of these applications sport lots of different views that you can look at. And in all honesty, most of them are the same or very similar, or there's a workaround to be able to get what you're looking for. So for example, Gantt, timeline, those are really standard. Map, there's not a dedicated map view inside of Airtable, but there's an extension that you can use for maps. So if you want to see it on a map, you can. Workload, well, in Airtable, we've got our timeline and there's a utilization view for it. So you can do it that way. Charts, well, it's not its own dedicated chart view, but you can do it as an interface inside of Airtable or as an extension. So again, there's lots of different ways to handle this. They're not all necessarily called dedicated views, but there's not big gaps between these. One that's a little bit more unique to Monday is going to be this files gallery, and that lets you take the uploaded files that you have to your boards and be able to see them. So if you're uploading a ton of documents and you want to see a summarization of those PDFs, that's a really nice thing that you can do here inside of Monday. And then the unique one for Airtable is going to be this list view, which you can see down here in our list of different views that we have. And when we create this is what we were showing before with those subtask implementation, but this is going to feel a little bit similar to Notion or some other applications where you can have nested data and we can collapse that and we can see these related actually from different tables. So the Monday equivalent would be if you had different boards and you viewed it all nested within those different boards. So again, this is a little bit unique to Airtable. The files, a little bit more unique to Monday. By and large, I don't see a lot of clients who are making a decision on one of these platforms based on the views that they have. Monday makes a big splash about the different types of columns that they have. There are some that are a little bit unique, like time tracking. But most of the functionality we can recreate in some kind of way inside of Airtable. So again, I don't see a huge differentiator. I think most of the time you're going to accomplish what you're looking for from a data capture standpoint with your field types or column types in either application. One of the things that I like about Airtable's way of implementing their field types, it doesn't feel like there's quite as many, but that's because they actually have different settings within those field types. So for example, if I look at a percent field here, well, I could actually display this as a progress bar. So rather than having two different fields and having, here's our numerical percentage field and here's a separate progress bar field, it's just wrapped into one. So sometimes I think Airtable doesn't get quite as much credit or make a big splash about all the different field types they have, but it's because they're pretty thoughtful about including different configuration settings within the fields that they do have. Now let's get into the real meat and potatoes of what separates Monday and Airtable in terms of core feature sets. So in Monday, we have what are called docs or work docs, and these are baked right into the application. Now, those of you who are familiar with Notion or Coda or other document type systems, this is going to feel very similar. So you can create your own documents. They can live within folders. And you can see we have all this really nice formatting. We have embeds. We can press a plus button or use a slash to be able to add content here. And let's take a look at these more options. You can see we have tons of different options. This is all text formatting, but look at these layouts, different kinds of media, embeds, productivity. We can include different types of widgets in here. Let's try one of these out. Let's put in a chart. And from our chart, we can choose, let's look at our video status. We want to do a weekly check-in on the statuses of the videos that we have. We'll press done. And once this loads, we can actually have this data pulling in real time. We can click and drill into that. We can exit the drill down. So you can see how powerful this is to be able to have documents that we can manage and collaborate on. so that our team can really work together as a team within the application. Now in Airtable, there's really no equivalent to this. You can try to link to a Notion doc or a Google Doc. You could reference that inside of the application, but there's nothing that is collaborative and being able to pull widgets and work on these documents in real time that feels like a separate application. The other thing that's really unique to Monday is their My Work area, and this has the ability to pull any kinds of tasks from all sorts of different boards that you have inside of the system. So it doesn't all need to be from our weekly checklist board. I've got it coming from our content board. We could have it from that video status board, all of the things that I need to work on. So when I'm managing my team or as an employee, if I'm looking and I want to say, what do I need to work on? What's the priority? When are the due dates? I can go to one screen as opposed to having to navigate to, say, 10 different boards throughout the application to find what I need to work on. In Airtable, there's really no unified mechanism for this. So if I have a table of tasks here and they're assigned to me, that's fine. I can see what I need to work on. But without doing some workarounds with syncing data from other places, there's no way I can see everything that I need to work on. And so typically you see a lot of implementations where there are fewer bases being utilized and fewer tables simply because it's hard to manage a growing architecture of your business where you say, oh, maybe I want to have a base for each client that I'm working on. So because of that, Airtable, when you implement it, is a little bit more rigid in the structure. And it's traditional in terms of kind of database theory and how you would set things up. But when you compare it to Monday, where you can say, hey, create 15 different boards and we'll show you your work in one space, it's two very different philosophies. So overall, I would consider Monday being a really strong collaborative work management platform. Airtable, we're going to talk about why it's really good for something else in just a second, but you can think of, if you want really strong collaboration features, you're going to get a lot out of Monday. Now, Airtable, on the other hand, is great for building your own custom apps for within your company. Monday, you're still kind of restricted to the views that you have. In Airtable, you can make entirely custom experiences. In Monday, I could expand a record and I could see the information about the fields that I have and some connected records, and we could add some widgets here. Well, let me just show you a few examples inside of Airtable. This one is creating your own outfits based on a wardrobe that you have, and so you can create a new outfit and save that outfit and be able to choose from different items of clothing that you have. But we've got really practical options for businesses too. So oftentimes we're doing invoice generators that we build. So we've got a green widget and I want to put in a quantity of 5. It's going to multiply that across with calculations and sum up all of our information at the bottom. And then we could go ahead and kick out that invoice to our customers. Super practical custom experiences that we can build that aren't just restricted to a list of records that we have. Maybe you want to use it for processes. And so every new person that's being onboarded, you capture information from them. You have instructions of what steps need to take place next. Or you have a custom renewals dashboard and you want to be able to see all of the money for that opportunity, and you can have charts, be able to see a summary of all the activities on here. There's so much you can do by building these really custom interfaces. So here's where I think these applications start to diverge a bit. Even though they're so similar at surface level, on Monday, you've got more collaborative features, more that work management side, a little bit easier to spin up and implement if you want more features that are out of the box. Airtable gives you this toolbox of tools where you can build really specialized experiences. Both of these are really valuable. It's just a question of which makes more sense for where your business is currently at. Now let me complicate this one more step further. If you're creating a board inside of Monday, you can make it shareable, and this is for working privately with guests outside of your account. So those guests can actually log in, they can update, they can make changes. This is perfect if you're an agency and you're looking to interact with your clients on the platform and not have to pay a ton for licensing, right? You want them to have free accounts because they're outside of your organization. Monday makes this exceptionally easy for you. Airtable really doesn't have a matching construct where you could have people outside of your organization who can still make updates to those records, create new records without paying for additional licensing. When it comes to automations, I almost think of Monday versus Airtable kind of like Zapier versus Make. And if you're not familiar with those, it's fine. But essentially in Monday, we've got very easy, simple, straightforward automations. And in Airtable, we have very sophisticated automations, which are still pretty easy, but we've got more power there. In Monday, we're essentially saying when this happens, then do this. Trigger action, if else. Very similar to a lot of applications. So we can say when this happens, when there's a status that changes, we'll look at our type column and we can say, hey, if it's a qualified lead, now we want to move this to a new group, or we want to notify people or send an email. There's lots of different options we can choose from that's a resulting action of what we do in the triggering step. But contrast this for a moment with Airtable, where we could say on button click, now we want to find records and we want to relate them and do a second find record step. And then we want to create a record. And then we're going to take that record and we're going to loop through a bunch of records and connect those records to the record we created previously. I know what I'm saying sounds complicated, and there's a reason, because oftentimes when you're building out these applications, you need more layers of logic to be able to have different conditions, different things that happen as you're processing the automation. So Monday has a lot of different actions we can choose from, but not as much on the middle, the logic side of what we want to build into our automations. So for that reason, Airtable's automations are much more powerful. Now, Monday does have a new workflows feature in beta, which feels more akin to something like a Zapier. It's more visual based. We can have different layers of steps. So it'll be interesting to see if the level of sophistication changes, or for its main clientele, if its current automations are sufficient in terms of the complexity that they need to do. So I wouldn't let this slow you down. If you do have more sophisticated automations that you need, let's say in Monday, you could kick that out to make.com and be able to do some more advanced things for your automations. Now, before we talk about integrations, I also want to mention that in Airtable, you can create your own scripts that run as part of automations. So you could have an automation that triggers your own JavaScript that interacts with the Airtable data to be able to do some more sophisticated things. Now, when it comes to integrations, in Airtable, you've got a handful of different options you can choose from, and they're kind of the big players that you'd expect. You've got some from document management and calendar management and Slack for team notifications. There's Jira. So you've got a handful of different options that you can do with integrations right out of the box. But most of us who are Airtable consultants typically are relying on webhooks and then using third-party services, again, like Zapier or Make, to be able to do a lot of the integration work. Now, contrast this with Monday, where you actually have more integration options. But again, it's similar to the automations. They're simpler in nature. So there's a lot of use cases that you can do out of the box, and they just work, and that's great. But if you find yourself saying, oh, I wish I could do something a little bit more advanced, maybe instead of just creating this Google document, I want to create a folder and then create the doc and put the doc in the folder. All of that, again, you're going to be reliant on third-party applications. So in Monday's nature, they want to create things that are easy to use, out of the box, that are available. Airtable is going to give you fewer integrations that are out of the box, but both of these platforms, in all honesty, we use outside tools if we need to do more advanced integrations. Okay, so now comes my favorite part where we talk about which application might be the best fit for you. From this video, I hope you can take away that there's no clear winner. It's not that this application is clearly heads and shoulders above the other one. There's advantages and disadvantages to every piece of software, but what's more important is which of those features are going to be key for you to utilize in your team or your business. In Monday's favor, I'd say if you have budget constraints, Monday is significantly cheaper than Airtable in most situations. Now, which of the plans you choose, you'll have to look at the features a little bit and determine which might be the right fit. But again, if budget is a big factor, then Monday's probably going to be a better fit. Monday also has more collaborative features. If you're really focused on project management and your team working together, then you're probably going to be looking at, hey, let's have our stand-ups and use our documents together. I want to see my work. Those features, if that resonates with you, Monday's going to be a better fit from the collaborative standpoint. And then as you're looking at automations and integrations, you might be feeling like, hey, my use cases are pretty basic. If it's basic use cases that you have for integrations, you might be able to get away out of the box just using Monday's platform and not even needing a third-party tool like Make or Zapier, which again, if you're budget conscious, that'll save you some money. Now, what are the strengths of Airtable? If you are looking to build custom applications for your team, you're saying, hey, we've used other software that's out there. It might not be the right fit for me. I want to tailor make this for the needs of my business, and I want to do it quickly and without code. Airtable's a great fit for you there too. And combine that with their powerful automations and all the sophistication you can do there, then I think that's going to be a better fit. So after watching this video, you probably are starting to lean towards one side or the other of which application might be the best fit for you. I'd be curious to hear down in the comments. And of course, if you need any help getting set up either with Monday or Airtable, don't hesitate to reach out to our website at automationhelpers.com, where we're offering free 30-minute consultations.